Our water connection acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and their connection to country, sky, water, and community. We extend our respect to the traditional custodians of the place where you are listening. This episode is recorded in Ghana country and Ngunnawal country in ACT Canberra. Why do water decisions often leave out the voices that have cared for country for tens of thousands of years? Are we ready to give up control to achieve the true partnership with First Nations communities? How can institutions shift from engaging First Nations people to empowering them? Today, we're having a conversation that challenges the water sector to do better, starting with how we engage with First Nations people. My name is Jess Brewarrina. I'm on a mission to increase your water curiosity, and this is our Water Connection. In this episode of our Water Connection, we sit down with Professor Phil Duncan, longtime advocate, educator, and patron of the young water professionals. Professor Phil Duncan is a member of the Brewarrina Nation. His homelands are Moree and Tarahirhia. Phil has over 40 years of experience working with First Nations people and government to improve the lives of First Nations people through recognition of their rich cultural history, the return of their lands, the improvement of their living conditions, and education of their next generation through both his employment and his active volunteer community work. Phil is extremely passionate about promoting greater partnerships and collaborations using two-way knowledge exchanges and enhancing the voices of traditional owners in land and water management via the integration of cultural science into Western scientific frameworks and models. We're very, very excited to have Phil as our guest speaker for our season premiere. Welcome to our Water Connection, Phil.
Yama. It's great to be with you, Jess, and great to be a part of this wonderful connection to our water networks and the range of people and agencies that are party to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it's wonderful really to have you here. And we have been talking about having this conversation for months. And one of the things that you told me last time we see each other is that when we recorded, I could ask you any of the difficult questions directly. And I took that on board when I prepared this script. So I would like to start by understanding a little bit, where do you think the water sector has gone wrong when it comes to engaging First Nations people?
Well, I believe that, number one, let me qualify that we are getting extremely better at it. We are getting better and better at inclusion, understanding culture, understanding the different dynamics of cultural connection to country and resources, particularly Gali, my language for water, across Australia. I think where we went wrong, we were an afterthought many years ago about the long-term sustainability and management of the precious resource called water. But I want to also say that, we've always had our champions. And over the preceding years, the journey has been wonderful to watch and unfold through collaboration, understanding, and more integration of cultural values as we move forward. So what I'm really saying here is if we look in the rear vision mirror and talk about the past, that's all we're going to see, the past. I'm excited about where we are now. I'm excited about people like yourself and us and our networks and assisting in unlocking that inner champion and building people's cultural capability, and therefore unlocking their cultural confidence to be better together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in only the time that I've been here in Australia, I've seen kind of a shift and like a lot of improvement in this particular relationship that the water sector has with First Nations. And I acknowledge that's probably not something that is exclusive of this sector. It's something that is a bit more broad in part of the Australian history. And I love how you say like we can have like a view of that rear mirror and have a look at what it is, but let's just move forward. And I think that's a very beautiful way of starting kind of this conversation in a way that we can, kind of learn from what we can do better in the future. You mentioned, or like I mentioned a little bit in the bio, about cultural science and cultural knowledge in solving a water problem. So I was really keen to ask you, like, what role does like cultural knowledge of these that you have described or point, of course, as cultural science have in transforming the way that we manage water?
That's a great question, but it's also part of an initiative, an ongoing rolling initiative. I believe that, in the past there was a distinct lack of knowledge around our connection to country through that symbiotic relationship we have and the cultural responsibilities to care for country and its many resources, and water's centrality to that. And, the three key platforms I've been advocating for understanding to create a greater curiosity is quality of life, longevity of life, and a quality cultural way of life. And water's centrality to those three platforms is important. So we as Indigenous people have always said that we've interacted with country since time immemorial. And the way that we have interacted is now recognised as a science. Yes, it was observational. Yes, it was interactive. But it was a responsibility on how we managed it in a sustainable, resilient manner. So I can remember when we started talking about water rights, and a very senior Ngarrindjeri man called it cultural flows. And it's grown from that platform of cultural flows, which is still a brand of water, to understanding that, our way of life has been one of culture, one of an observational science, knowing how to change and move with the seasons. And so we've branded that way of life and our knowledge systems as cultural science. And we've been able to clearly demonstrate that both Western science and cultural science are not combative. They actually can complement one another. So once you break down the fear of the unknown by talking, educating, and creating a greater and deeper understanding of our cultural values, we have now seen wonderful opportunities and many, many examples of how both cultural science and Western science have interacted in a very positive way. And we can only get better as we get braver and more courageous about how we can be innovative together, how we can continue to walk and talk together, share the load, share the journey. So it has many aspects. So I just quickly want to round up this question with, our science was not a written science. It was an observational science. And I think that at times we should seize these moments in time now to look at observing, going out, sitting on country with traditional owners, but also with other key stakeholders, and not just looking, but watching, not just listening, but actually hearing, and not just touching, but actually feeling, and being willing to make yourself vulnerable to exploring the silence of nature and all it can give us.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think I agree with you. Like that, science as a concept of the West and comes with a certain kind of path that has gone through, but that doesn't mean that any other type of knowledge is not science. It's just the same. It's science as it is, but like coming in different ways. You did mention that you have multiple, like that you had some examples of like really good things that have happened when you combine these two and you have this two-way knowledge. Would you mind just sharing one of those examples with us?
Oh, 100%. So when we talk, if we look at the Murray-Darling Basin itself and we look at a precious item called our native fish, and not long ago, our native fish stocks were down to almost less than 10% since first contact. So, and a lot of that was due to barriers, weirs, and infrastructure that has decreased the opportunity for our native fish to migrate back to their traditional spawning grounds. So one great initiative that I had the opportunity to be involved in and lead was fish passage. Now, the Brewarrina town Brewarrina itself, the Nyimba people have the Byamis Nunu, 45,000-year-old fish traps. So when we looked at the Brewarrina town weir and it was modified, there was a collaboration between the Nyimba people, traditional owners, and key engineers and scientists to look at co-designing a fish passage that was suitable, that added to the cultural aesthetics of the project footprint. And what we came up with through the cultural lens was a reverse rock ramp ladder that is now iconic in the Upper Darling, in the Upper Barker. And it was a true collaboration of people being willing to sit and listen and look at how they could co-design a structure, again, that allowed water quality, water security for the town, but also allowed the ongoing connectivity of that wonderful system called the Barker Darling.
Wow, yeah, that's a very interesting example. I think I saw another thing similar to that in Tasmania. I went last year now to visit around that kind of fish passages and all of that. So it's certainly a good example of it. How does that start? Like, I understand, like, once the project is on the ground and like you got to the co-designing, that to me already sounds like a massive win. You know, the moment that you actually sit down with the engineers and with the planners and with the First Nations people, that's already to me a huge endeavor and a huge win. How do we get there?
First and foremost, we got to demystify the complexities and create a safe environment where we can have the courageous conversations, where we can talk openly and discuss and explore the opportunities on how we can move forward. So having that safe environment, and then people being willing to listen, to learn, to look at what is important for that footprint of the project, and the value, not just the environmental value, but the cultural, the economic value, the quadruple bottom line, including the social values of the infrastructure. And if we work back from that particular position. So we all have a desire for a stronger, more vibrant environmental arenas for our kids and our next generations to interact in. And that was another kind of fundamental thing that we identified that linked us all, that was sitting in the room. So finding the connections and starting the conversation from there, but also demystifying or lessening the combativeness, if I could use that word, by just allowing people to talk and be kind and share the load and share the journey. It's not easy because some people don't like being vulnerable, but, you know, I encourage people to allow themselves to be vulnerable because sometimes that's the best way we learn, the best way we can be better together.
And I think it's the best way to connect as well, as you say, that forming that safe kind of environment where these conversations come into place, and the companies in charge of delivering some of these projects, they can really bring on those environmental and cultural and social values right there with their technical kind of outcomes that you want and any economic and other aspects that you have as well. So I think it's very genuine and very important to highlight that. So if we think about like a company within the water sectors and when it is trying, generally wants to do better, what would be that first thing that they should change in how they work with First Nations people? Is it creating that safe environment? What do you think is kind of those small steps that maybe some companies can take on?
Well, I would say that the companies need to do their due diligence and do their community profiles, identify the demographic, the Indigenous demographic, the key organisations and institutions that are out there, Indigenous institutions that are out there. Then come with a wondering mind. One of the key things that I like to influence in the projects that I get to work on is actually turning up and not saying, changing the conversational dynamic. In the past, we turn up and saying, we're doing this project, you know, and this is what it's designed to do. This is how it's come about. I've changed the way that I do business and encouraged, well, I've been doing it the same way for a long time, but encourage people to turn up and say, look, we've got this project. This is what it's designed to do. This is the budgets with it. How do you see yourself assisting? So giving leadership and ownership for the community to give us directions on how they want to interact with us, but also taking the time to clearly articulate the benefits of the project and then looking and taking a deeper dive into exploring what are the outcomes from it. And from there, you can also get some ideas of the impacts outside the project specifications that can benefit the community. Now, I'm going to use an example, come back to the Brewarrina fish traps again and the reverse rock ramp. One of the byproducts of that was we got the Biami's Nunu World Heritage listed. And that was an initiative that the project team undertook for themselves because we heard the community, they were frightened about that. The other byproduct of a successful implementation of the reverse rock ramp at Brewarrina was it assisted in the reopening of the Brewarrina Cultural Centre. And now, so again, to come back to that, adding to the cultural aesthetics of the project footprint and country, and people being willing to listen to country being the decision maker through the voices of the traditional owners that have the cultural authority to speak for country. So now these Brewarrina, the Brewarrina Cultural Centre, they're running at least 2 tours a day in the holidays, sometimes 3 tours a day. And during non-holiday periods, sometimes 3 tours a week. So it's become part of that local footprint, cultural ecotourism, where Indigenous culture is intrinsically entrenched in how they run their tours, how they talk about their township, their society, and their cultural connection.
Yeah, that's an amazing example, really, because it you can see all the effects that doing this early kind of co-designing and designing a technical solution that also adds to the cultural value of the project. Then it has probably impacts that were not necessarily thought out at the beginning, like the heritage listing and like all the benefits into the community. So definitely that is something to consider. So yeah, what I'm reading from this is like, yes, being able to create that environment for safe communications and bringing people and bringing the First Nations communities on board from the beginning. You mentioned kind of when you get involved into the projects, you try to kind of redirect these conversations. How can people, I mean, we would love to have you kind of in all the projects that we have around so you can direct those conversations, right? But like it's certainly not possible. But what can we learn to how to implement those things? In particular, I was keen to kind of learn from young water professionals that maybe are very keen to kind of bring this into the table, may or may not be like the leadership on the part that kind of controls some of the decisions, but how can we start shifting that frame to bring this new way, or like this more collaborative way of producing projects?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of things. There's the word leadership in there. It's how we engage Indigenous, the community leadership. So sometimes creating the opportunity to have a cultural advisor be employed, to be the community communicator, the community liaison, and engaging that community leadership and seeking their guidance and advice as we move through the project. It's also a part of not being a FIFO, fly in and fly out. You're actually investing in the community. You're building a skill that's left there for future project opportunities that come into that footprint. So we can always provide the leadership from a project perspective and a project management perspective, which is wonderful. But sometimes to be the leaders, to invite and engage Indigenous leadership, sometimes it's okay to take your hands off the steering wheel and let someone else have a drive, if I can use that analogy. Because we as project managers and project teams don't necessarily know how to navigate the community cultural protocols and the many twists and turns that could provide to us. So by engaging and meaningful employment for the life of the project from a community perspective is a key thing I want people to think about, a key initiative I want people to think about, because it can build success. Now, why I'm saying that, if the community does not have a sense of ownership or involvement in the project, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So you've got to invite the ownership in. That's that sharing the load, sharing the journey. And then, people should not be surprised. It actually leads to the two-way knowledge exchanges, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can imagine that. And really, I see kind of how having someone on the ground, like, that can be the connection between the community and really bringing them involved into creating these solutions. A little bit of what comes to mind is that in some of I'm not saying this in general of the whole water industry, maybe some of the experiences that I've had myself is like, you create kind of a solution even from very early days. You don't even have funding for your project just yet. You have a problem and you propose some solutions. But at that early stage, you probably haven't articulated those cultural values and even some of the other ones. You do a very high level analysis of what your project could look like. And then it moves down the kind of project life cycle. And then it's harder to kind of bring all of those kind of cultural values back and then redesign new solution, and you're not sort of starting from scratch. So have you encountered that where like projects in very early stages have not considered these solutions and then how to transform it into something that does include the cultural values?
There's been many experiences. I have not been involved in those, but I've observed the difficulties of not planning longer, stronger, and deeper before you go out on country. You need to build your capability to be able to be approachable. Number one, have a greater cultural understanding of the project arena or region you're going into, the people. So preparation is important. And it's no different to the type of preparation you would go to for a major infrastructure like a dam. That's a big example, but it is a relevant example. So taking the dive internally, so building your success internally, so when you're ready to springboard outwards with the project, success can be a lot more streamlined process. But always be willing to challenge yourselves about, I sat in a meeting once and I put on the table that we should be engaging a community liaison officer. And when I clearly articulated the benefits of it, they said, that's a fabulous idea. We should do that. And, for a lot of companies now, it's business as usual, becomes BAU. And it's good. And it's the same as if you would want to do a major project with a non-Indigenous stakeholder group. You would do your due diligence in understanding who they are and asking for guidance and advice. How can we be better with you on this project? How can we integrate your involvement into this project?
Yeah. I think that's definitely, bringing them as early as possible and then having that two-way conversation from the very beginning. I think it's something that is very important. And be flexible because, in every project, like I work more on the kind of high-level early planning of the project. And we have to make so many assumptions because we haven't gone down the path of defining absolutely everything. So it's keeping ourselves like flexible enough to be able to implement other ways of thinking and other ways of solving the problem later on. So that's a very good point. I was keen on kind of going back a little bit to the role that maybe young people in their careers can have. Maybe they're not involved in specific projects, but like, how do you think that young water professionals within their own roles can really contribute to this more inclusive water management that uses like cultural science and kind of like more traditional kind of Western ways of seeing water management?
One of the key values that I find about the young water professionals is their curiosity to be better, their curiosity to learn, their curiosity to be better at what they're going to be doing. So if they haven't had the chance to, through their academic studies, is to do an Indigenous course, to do an Indigenous module. It prepares you as you move through academe and prepares you for the professional life afterwards. And if you haven't, always be willing and curious to learn more. Knowledge can be the very key ingredient that takes us forward together. So having an in-depth understanding of cultural values, knowledge, perspectives, and how we look after country. I think the other aspect of that is that don't be afraid of asking the questions. But when you go to the communities with the young water professionals, ask them how, again, I come back to that changing the conversation dynamic. How do you see yourself? Can you tell us, not how do you see yourself, can you please tell us how you would like to be involved and what that looks like? And the other thing about young water professionals is there are standards, there are platforms, they're there to be challenged. And I encourage the young water professionals to look at the future through their eyes, the eyes of the next generation, because, change is good. Change is not, don't be frightened of change. Challenging change is a good thing, because if we can do things better and together and get a better outcome, then country is singing, and the value that you leave at the end of the project is there for forever.
Yeah, I think I really like that you kind of have those two things of really educating and inviting. And I feel like that this is not only for young water professionals. Like I feel like every person that is within the industry that has an interaction with community should be taking some extra like education or some of the stuff. And it comes to mind some of the things that we're planning on the work that I do with AWA to really put some of this knowledge back to people accessible so they can learn, because it's people acknowledge that is very important, but we need to start making the next steps into making everyone aware of what are the ways that we can improve our interaction with First Nations people in our project and in general in the industry. And certainly the courage to change, I think that is something that is very valuable. That is, sometimes it can be like difficult for young water professionals, but this is a very great invitation from you to really be courageous into, if you think that things should be doing differently, speak up and make sure that you can make the change that can bring these changes into our industry.
I might just add with that, if I may, Jess, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to say.
Yeah, no, I think it's very valuable. And I love how you keep saying, like, go out there and ask, how do you want to be involved? Instead of coming, hey, this is the solution of it. What do you think of it? Because then that's already like a second thought, as you said right at the beginning. Like, we designed this. What do you think about it? It's like, no, what is your involvement here to do? And maybe sharing what the problem that we're trying to solve is, so we can all come into a solution together for that. So. Hey, Phil, what are you like thinking about the future and like maybe the future that you see of true partnerships of First Nations people in the water sector? What does that look like in your dreams, kind of for keeping that lens in the future, and how else can we improve?
I call it purpose-built teams, where you've got an Indigenous person, your engineer, your environmental scientist, looking at building purpose-built teams where you have as part of that team subject matter experts across the realm of stakeholders and issues that a project is designed to address. I see a future where we are seeing more and more young Indigenous people taking up academic studies. I'd like to see more in the engineering space. But, the social science, the environmental science complement. I believe that purpose-built teams are complementary. And I believe that they are the way forward in the future. I've seen that. I've actually, with all the projects that I get to work on, that's my ideology. That's my platform. And I ask, when I'm asked to lead a project, I actually say, okay, let's unpack what we've got, both in the human resource element and the knowledge element. So, I believe that we are practicing that in a lot of ways, and people might not think that they are, but there is a lot of that happening now.
Yeah, I like that. I like that is how you have framed this whole conversation into these changes are happening now. We are capable of doing that. We are doing it, and we just need to make sure that those are spread around more until a point that this is our BAU and this is just the way that we deliver our projects. Phil, the last two questions are something that I always ask my every guest in the podcast. How would you explain your work to your friend who knows nothing about this sector?
There's a couple of answers to that. The first one, from an Indigenous perspective, I tell young people with every opportunity I get, when you work in water, you've got a job for life, and that the relationships and the friendships you establish by way of how you interact with people and how you carry yourself, they become friends for life. It can be life-changing. As for me, how I explain it as I get the wonderful opportunity to work with like-minded people to protect such a globally recognized precious resource called water. And I also talk about, amplify how that gives me the opportunity to learn. If I don't learn something from a project, then I think that's a bit of a failure on that. Together, I think the best way to say it is my life has been blessed for the past 40-odd years in working in the water arena, simply because the people that have taken me on their journey allowed me to be a part of their journey, and that, reciprocity, they've been a part of my journey and my growth. So be curious, be as dynamic as what you can be in this wonderful water arena, where there are some amazing people who share the same value about making a difference for our next generations and looking at that change through the eyes of our future generations.
Yeah, this is incredible. I said I was going to ask 3 different questions that I ask all my guests, and you answer all 3 into one, which is great. Like, we're so, like, you're so connected to the project as it is that, because one was like, what message would you have to people early in their careers? And honestly, we have been talking about this, it's like, be curious about it. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge kind of how things are. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Oh, look, Jess,
in
I
that
just think our
sense.
water connection and what you're doing with me here, I want to encourage people that get the opportunity to listen. If they are contacted and asked, as you have done with me, inviting me to be a party to it, I encourage them to jump in and take the opportunity, calm and down, seize the day, seize the moment to be involved. Because these type of podcasts connect us. They reach not just those of us in the water arena, they reach the nation and they reach the world and can influence people about, how it is a must for us to have a relationship, share the load and share the journey, but also highlighting
Absolutely.
that connectivity. So I encourage people just saying, listen, get in love with water connection and be involved.
Thank you.
And look at
No,
our
thank you for
relationship, Jess. I think an example is our relationship. It's one that's fun, it's respectful, and we share an ideology of making a difference by creating a safe place for these courageous conversations, because that's exactly what you've done.
absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Like this is something that I was looking forward to do for many months, and like having you kind of sharing all that knowledge and all that courageous and that like spirit of like really taking the next steps is really why I see you, of course, as our young water professional patron from the Australian Water Association.
Well, I just wanted to say one last key message from me is to the young water professionals, please, please understand that everything you aspire to achieve is on the other side of fear.
Oh, that's very valuable. Like very, very valuable. I think it has been one of the things that has guided me into doing this, because there is nothing like doing something completely new, and I just kind of went with it with the fear of like maybe failing, and here I am now year 3 doing it and having these opportunities to have conversations with you. Phil, how did you ended up working in Buddha? How did you end up studying into this?
Well, it's a very interesting story. And to cut it short, I had a dream. I come from a remote, town on the northwest slopes and plains, New South Wales, Moree. And that as a young person, I wanted to be the best rugby league player in the world. And so sport gave me the opportunity to leave Moree and go to Sydney. And then it dawned on me that, sport isn't the be all, the end all. And when I got confused, my grandfather said, think about what I've taught you, think about country. And he actually said, more than 40 years ago, the environment and looking after country is going to be the next big industry. And here we are.
Here we
And it
are.
was being able to seek guidance and advice from my grandfather and my father and my mother and key people around me helped me make that decision. And I was frightened. Believe me, Jess, I don't know this. I'm not a scientist. I'm not academic. But my cultural knowledge held me strong. And I stayed true to those values and those teachings. But I also kept inviting people to come on the journey. Let's talk about what you don't understand, and let's see how we can unpack that together. So that's how I ended up in the water arena and where I am today and what I've achieved and what I've had the opportunity to experience. I've had some of the most amazing mentors, not just Indigenous. I want a big hoy out to all my non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, my mentors, yourself. They give me the opportunity to use my voice to encourage people to be curious about friendships and relationships and making a difference together and not working in isolation of one another. I think the other big thing is that we've now got a platform in the water arena where particularly our young water professionals can challenge the status quo and take it to the next level. And we should be encouraging that. We should be encouraging the uplifting of our young water professionals to keep rising and taking our opportunities to the next level. So that's
Yeah,
how I ended up here.
absolutely.
It's been a long journey. It's been amazing. I've traveled the world 4 times. I've been to some of the most amazing places, met and sat on country with some of the most amazing Indigenous people that have the same values, the same
Yes.
cultural connections. So
Yeah, that's
my big thing is water. When you work in water, it is central to everything globally. And it can be the very, very arena where you get to make a difference.
Yeah. And as you say before, it's a work for life. I think that stuck with me as well from what you said before. And it's beautiful to know kind of that story behind of like, it was really that connection to the environment, which some people get there like from early on, have those values present. Some other ones get here by chance and they just stay. So it's very beautiful to learn kind of those career kind of paths that people have taken. Phil, thank you very much for your time today. This was a wonderful conversation in which I hardly follow any of the script that I have here, which I love because it's just going from the things that were coming at me and like the curiosity that I had of understanding how some of the things have worked. So thank you very much for always being so generous with your knowledge, for really be a patron and an advocate for the next generation of water leaders. And let's just keep having these conversations where hopefully we keep learning from you and keep learning from all other First Nations communities in where we do our work to really co-design the solutions that can just bring, as you said, that quadruple kind of bottom line where we just not only are aiming for our projects to be technically sound or like that make sense economically, but they really benefit culturally, the environment and social and other aspects. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jess. Stay safe, stay well to you and your family.
Thank you. And this is all for today in our Water Connection Season 3 premiere. We are very excited for 2026 and for bringing you amazing and interesting conversations to help spreading water knowledge, as Phil say, within us, but also getting people outside of water to understand how we actually care for this resource. Thank you very much for listening and being part of our community. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and social media for updates, highlights, and more ways to connect. Keep your curiosity flowing and see you next time.